Hey, today I wanted to share a little used book haul of some stuff I picked up in the last week. A week ago, there was a library book sale at the library near me, which only happens on occasion, usually just once a season, and I find it is the very best place to go book shopping for me personally. It is so cheap. All of the paperbacks are only 50 cents. The hardcovers are $1, and they usually have so much to look at, and I always come away with a bunch of things that I'm really happy to have found. And just my kind of process in general with buying books is I don't typically buy any new books for myself. If I do buy books for myself, they're probably used, and I just kind of wait for my birthday or Christmas to come around when someone wants to give me a gift. Then I will ask someone to get me a book that I haven't been able to find used or is currently not available at my library. So I really take advantage of these library book sales to get a bunch of stuff for the cheap, and yeah, just I basically look for authors that I'm familiar with, that I know that I want to read at some point, and potentially some stuff that I know that I can't get at the library as well. So it's a good opportunity for that. And I wanted to share what I got. I got so many good things, starting with Weep Not Child by Ngũgĩ wa thiong'o. This is an African author. He is from Kenya, I believe. Yes, he is a Kenyan author, and this is was his very first novel published, and it is about the Mau Mau War or uprising by the Kenyans against the British colonial rule, and that rebellion did last, I believe, a few years, and unfortunately was quashed, and the British retained their colonial rule for some years following that incident, but it was a key moment that led to decolonization in Kenya. And Weep Not Child is a fiction story about that event and the effects of the Mau Mau War. And I've heard of Ngũgĩ wa thiong'o before, but I had not heard of this book. I actually had heard about Decolonizing the Mind, which is a nonfiction work of his, and also Wizard and the Crow, I believe, was published in the mid-2000s. His most recent fiction book, I believe. He is still alive. I just actually watched an interview with him so that I could try and learn to pronounce his name correctly. And I'm actually going to link that interview down below because I found it so interesting. He's very well spoken. He has a lot to say that is incredibly relevant and engaging, and it is awesome that he is still alive today, still writing and speaking about all of these different things, particularly about decolonizing Africa. And yeah, just a really awesome author that I was excited to find one of his works there. I love the library book sale because so many of the books are older. They're these old editions. They have awesome covers. Also, just kind of like the smaller book paperback size is kind of my favorite. And what's also fun is you just find so many little treasures in used books as you do. And in this one, actually, I found an overdue library slip from 1971, and it was actually from the Berkeley Library, and this person had checked out Is Paris Burning, and they were told that their book is overdue and they may have to pay $3 to replace the book. So not that steep of a cost to pay if they never were able to return it, but just kind of fun things like that that make used books so special to me. Just kind of fun when you find a little treat in there, someone's story. The second book that I picked up was Scarlet Song by Mariama. This is an author that I am familiar with. I have read So Long a Letter by this author. That was a few years ago now. This is another African author. Mariama was a Senegalese author, and she often wrote about the way that traditional, kind of like cultural traditions were oppressive to women, and just like gender norms in Senegal and Africa. And that's what So Long a Letter was about, a grieving widow and the kind of treatment and ostracization that she experienced there. A fictional book, but Mariama Ba was divorced multiple times in her life, which was in itself kind of seen as unacceptable. And, you know, a divorced woman was and is cast aside. And so Scarlet's song actually is about two lovers who come together, fall madly in love. They are from two different backgrounds and social classes, and that marriage eventually kind of falls apart due to societal pressure, people telling them that this marriage is not okay for whatever reason. So I am excited to read more from her. I believe this is her only other work other than So Long a Letter. I was reading that Scarlet's song was written when she was dying from an illness and actually wasn't published until after her death. So this was her final work, and I don't believe there's anything else other than So Long a Letter in this. So I was happy to find this and be able to continue reading her work and complete her work in its entirety. The next book I picked up was by another African author, this one very well known. This is A Man of the People by Chinua Achebe. This is a Nigerian author, very well known for his book Things Fall Apart, which I haven't read yet, and I probably will start there when it comes to him. But for 50 cents, this copy I just thought was amazing. I love the cover. I also love the old orange on this book. It's awesome. This is part of the African Writers series. And this I read about after I picked it up. I knew that I wanted it, 50 cents, and an author that I want to read from in this beautiful copy. This is a political satire, which does sound like something I will really enjoy. So excited to get to this, though I will very likely still start with Things Fall Apart with him. I then picked up a hardcover. Again, the hardcovers are $1. Paperbacks were 50 cents, so expensive for the library book sale. $1 for The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This is a book that I've heard a lot about, but kind of not really knowing exactly what it was about, just knowing that a lot of people really love this book. It did win the 1997 Booker Prize, and this was actually her debut novel, so very impressive to win such a prestigious award off your very first book. This is an historical fiction novel that is set in Kerala, India during, I think the late 60s is the time frame that this is set, and it follows two siblings. They are twins, and so I believe it kind of is a family saga type of book that focuses specifically on these siblings and their relationship, but excited to get to that, knowing that so many people really love this book. I then found As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. Very famous. Haven't read Faulkner yet. I'm kind of scared of him. His works do seem quite intimidating, but As I Lay Dying, to me, just sounded the most interesting based off the synopsis. This is about a family in their journey to bury the matriarch of the family. As like all of Faulkner's work, this is set in the South. He was a very famous American author of Southern literature, and this is set in Mississippi. And yeah, just sounded interesting. Maybe a good place to dive in with Faulkner. I'm gonna find out. But again, I want to read a lot of his works, though this sounded the most intriguing to me just based off the synopsis. So I was excited to find the one I wanted to start with there. Next, for probably the oldest copy that I picked up, so worn, this is Cane by Jean Toomer. This is like my favorite size of book. It's so tiny and cute. Just like fits so easily in one hand. This is another famous American author. again, writing about the South. I think specifically this is about the juxtaposition between South and North, and Jean Toomer was very famous during the Harlem Renaissance, and this was a key novel of that time period, which I'm excited to get to, and I'm sure this is going to be good, or at least something I will enjoy. I then picked up The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. This I hadn't heard about before, though Gloria Naylor's name sounded familiar to me, so that kind of keyed me in as maybe something I wanted to look at. And again, amazing cover. Loved that. On the back, they write, "The most refreshing voice in the Black idiom since readers first discovered Toni Morrison," from Claude Brown, author of Man-Child in a Promised Land. I am familiar with Claude Brown, though I have not read Man-Child in a Promised Land, and I am very familiar with Toni Morrison. Love her work, so was eager to pick this up, hearing that reference made there. This is a novel in 7 stories, so I think they're interconnected stories that kind of form a novel. This is another award-winning book. It won the National Book Award, and it follows Black women in America and their lives, and just sounds like another great read. Ceremony by Leslie Marmon Silko. This is a book that I've heard a lot about as being one of the best from a Native American author. Leslie Marmon Silko was born in New Mexico and raised on the Laguna Pueblo Reservation, which is where her fictional book takes place as well. This is about a World War II war veteran who returns back to the reservation, is feeling, say, estrangement and alienation, and kind of is reconnecting with his culture and traditions. So, and it sounds like a great book to read. And I have not read Leslie Marmon Silko before, though I have heard of her. And the final fiction book I picked up, I was really excited to find. I was totally not expecting this. Like I mentioned, most of the books at the library book sale are quite a bit older, and they generally have like some pretty popular stuff, though there's some obscure titles in there as well. But this is Nobody Is Ever Missing by Catherine Lacey. And no, this is no like brand new book, but fairly recent. And Catherine Lacey, I read last year her book Pew, and I really, really liked that book. It was so interesting because I really enjoyed the reading experience, but when it like culminated at the end, I just wanted to reread it right back from the start. And just over time, I've been thinking more and more about that book. It's been lingering so much in my mind and really stood out to me as a fantastic book that's saying a lot. I don't know anything about this other than that this is her debut novel, so I'm excited to read this. And I'm just going to go into it knowing very little, like how I did with Pew, and I hope to be impressed by what I find. Then for the nonfiction that I found, I picked up Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian Manifesto by Vine Deloria Jr. This is an author that I am familiar with, both because I've read him before. I have read God is Red, which is a very dense nonfiction about Native religion and the kind of ceremonial practices and just kind of philosophies relating to religion as seen from a Native perspective. And this is his much more famous book. Custer Died for Your Sins was written in 1969, and it brought attention to a lot of the issues the American Indian movement sought to address. This, again, I'm kind of expecting another dense read from Vine Deloria Jr. He definitely has been one of the more challenging authors that I've read from, just in terms of how much there is referenced in his books, how much there is to kind of research to make sure I'm fully understanding everything he's saying to get the proper context. Because I'm not very well educated on these things. And yeah, I'm really excited to get to this. Another like perfect size book. I love this size. Amazing cover. Love how worn it is. and excited to get to that. This was probably my favorite find because it was something that I was totally unexpecting, a book that I had never heard of before, and that was The Black Woman, an anthology. Black Women Speak Out, a brilliant and challenging assembly of voices that demand to be heard, edited with a preface by Toni Cade Bambara. I've never heard of this book before. However, Toni Cade Bambara and some of the other authors in here I certainly have heard from and read from. There is Alice Walker, Nikki Giovanni, Audre Lorde, and there's plenty of other people in here who I've never heard of, and this just sounds amazing. It is an essay collection. I know that there's also some poetry in there as well, and it just sounds super fascinating. This was first published in 1970, and it honestly kind of struck me as almost similar to a book I read last year called Black Women Writers at Work, which was amazing. It was, again, kind of published around the same time frame, I believe, and it was recently republished, kind of brought back to attention, and it was a collection of essays from Black women writers around this time. That's where I read some things from Nikki Giovanni, I read some things from Alice Walker, I read some things from Nitozake Shange, and just a whole slew of awesome women. And there's some overlap between who is in that essay collection and who is in this one, though we're talking about two different topics, one being on writing as a Black woman and the other being on just like life as a Black woman in America. And of course there's overlap between those two topics, but it will be really interesting to hear what these amazing authors have to say about their personal experiences and the way they are viewing the world in the year 1970. I then also got Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson. This I was very familiar with. I've actually read half of this book in the past, and I don't really remember why I stopped reading it. I think it just was at a weird time where I was in the middle of moving and I ended up giving away the book. So now I have a copy again, which isn't really uncommon. I often read a book and then just get rid of it. I don't have a lot of space to keep books, and I honestly don't really want to keep many books. I have some of my very, very, very favorites, but even those I feel like, I could part with. There are other copies out there. I know that I can access these things again to enjoy them on a reread if I want to, and I do think it is really important to not hoard books, to release them back into circulation. I was blessed to get this book for 50 cents. Why not put it in a free library and let someone else have at it once I am done with it? But again, back to this. I read half of this before. I am going to restart at the beginning because it has been many years, but these are the prison letters of George Jackson, who was very important in the Black Power movement. Though he was in prison this entire time, he was kind of organizing from prison, and he was in San Quentin. He had correspondence with Huey Newton and the Black Panthers, and he eventually was killed during a kind of a prison break. Crazy situation. There's a lot to read up on this, and I do recommend reading, quite a few things, but just some other books by people who were kind of players during this time. Huey Newton's book, Revolutionary Suicide, is probably one of my favorite books of all time ever. It's one that I've reread multiple times, and that was where I was first introduced to George Jackson, I believe. Angela Davis's autobiography, very, very good. And then you have kind of the other people. You got Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. I need to read that still. I just read last year Elaine Brown's book. There's a lot of people there to read about this stuff if you are very interested, and something that I also studied in school. I went to school at San Francisco State. A lot of this stuff was happening in the Bay Area, so this was a focus in my ethnic studies courses. And yeah, something I want to get to. Hopefully I get through the entire book this time around. The Force of Witness by Simone de Beauvoir, Volume 1, After the War. This is just an installment in her autobiography series, which there's a bunch of books in. She wrote a lot, very important feminist, and I have yet to read in her autobiography. I've read some excerpts from The Second Sex, which I hope to read in its entirety this year. So this also isn't the first volume in her autobiography. I believe Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter might be first. Not entirely sure, but I know this one is not, so I'm not going to start here, but was a good find nonetheless. And then the last book I got at the library book sale was For the Time Being by Annie Dillard. She is an author that I've read a couple things from, really enjoyed, and just overall her work is incredibly, almost like soothing and relaxing to me. She writes about nature, she writes about philosophy, she writes essays, and her works really just kind of bring me a lot of peace. And this is an essay collection that I think is more heavy on the philosophy rather than the nature writing. It looks like she's kind of talking a lot about religion in here, different world religions. So I'm excited to read another work by Annie Dillard, who is not an all-time favorite author, but I certainly haven't not enjoyed any of her books. So very happy to continue to read her. The last book I'm going to show, I didn't get at the library book sale, but I got it today at the local used bookstore. It's Independent Bookstore Day, so I did want to go and support. And I found a great thing. I found The Chelsea Whistle by Michelle T., who I've been loving for kind of about a year now. I read her for the first time, I think in spring of last year, and Michelle T. is hilarious. She is a performance artist, she is a poet, and she is really just hilarious. This is her childhood memoir. It talks about growing up in Chelsea, Massachusetts, place I'm very unfamiliar with. Michelle T. ended up moving to the West Coast, then spent a lot of her life and still lives in San Francisco. So a lot of her things mention things that I'm much more familiar with in terms of place and people and things that she's referencing. But it will be fun to see her East Coast roots in this memoir. Excited to get to this, and again, super fun to find another book by Michelle T., an author that I'm just kind of eagerly picking up anything that I see from her, because they don't really have any of her stuff at the library. Anytime I see it at a used bookstore, I feel like I score when I get one of her works. So that is it for today. Just wanted to share what I've picked up recently, what I'm excited for. And this Michelle T. one, actually, I was going to total it up. The Michelle T. book cost me $8. And the library books, I believe, also cost me $8 or $8.50. So for around $16, I got all those books. And I'm so excited to enjoy them. And I feel like used books shopping is even more exciting than looking for a new book, because you never know what you're going to find. And you always come away with something good. So excited to get to those. Let me know if you've read any of them. If you want to read any of them, let me know if you haven't heard of any of them, or if you have any favorites in the bunch, and I will see you next week. I think the next video you'll be seeing from me is going to be the April wrap-up, and I've been so busy reading a lot of books to talk about and share, and I'm excited to do that with you. Bye-bye.